Hey everybody, welcome back to another in my series of my top 5 that I've been doing lately, and a lot of people have been enjoying this and getting some great feedback from it, so I figure I'll continue with a few more of these. And today I wanted to talk about, I thought it would be fun to do, a video about my top 5 effects pedals. Now you might say, well, you're a Helix user, Podgo, HX Stomp, we don't really use pedals anymore. But I mean, we can set up, as we all know, anybody who's used the Helix before, we can set it up in Stomp box mode and use it strictly as if we were laying out a pedal board without all the, you know, the fussiness of cutting cables and soldering and however we build our pedal boards, and we can just assign blocks, reorder them, and it's quite nice. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to go through and talk about, even in the past when I've had you know, more real pedal board setups, I always tended to gravitate towards the same few effects. I've never been a huge effects player. I kind of like more of just a straight organic tone with the odd little bit of flavoring added in, if that makes sense. That's not to say I haven't done pretty dramatic stuff in the studio and whatnot before, but I find whenever I'm playing live, unless it's a very special situation, you give me these 5 effects, I'm going to be able to pretty much do any gig that I need to. Okay, so I thought it'd be fun to kind of count down these and show you which ones they are on the Helix that I would use and how I might set them up really quick. You know, I've done some videos in the past about each of these effects separately, but I'll give a kind of a quick rundown. I thought it might be a fun look at it. So, without further ado, let's look at number 5. So coming in at number 5 would be a compressor, okay? And every pedal board I've ever owned, I've always had a compressor on it. And I've had a bunch of different ones, everything from the Keeley compressor to sewer compressor. One of my all-time favorites in the real world was made by a Canadian company, actually, just not too far down the road from here. Well, it's a bit of a drive, but from Ottawa, Empress Effects. They made a beautiful compressor. Can't remember what it's called now. It was a blue one. I don't even know if they make it anymore, but what a wonderful compressor. So I've always had a compressor on my board, and as a lot of folks know, I use it at the end of my signal chain just to give it a little bit of glue and a touch of compression, and that's how I actually would use it as well on my pedal board, even though it's not coming after the amp, right? I'd put it in the loop at the end. And it worked out beautifully like that. So a compressor is a really important thing for me. And there was times when I had 2 of them on my boards, one at the front and one at the back end. Something more like, you know, like the LA Studio Comp and the Helix, an LA 2A style compressor at the end, and then maybe something with a little more tweakability as far as attack and release and threshold and whatnot. Something like more like the deluxe compressor in the Helix. So let's go over here to HX Edit, and I just have a quick little preset set up here using the Matchstick Channel 1 amp, nothing really crazy. And if you notice, there's nothing else in the chain other than the normal high and low shelf I put in there all the time. But yeah, so I have the LA Studio Comp at the end, and you know, like I said, a lot of folks who have watched my videos know that I use this on almost everything, unless, you know, I'm on the Stomp or maybe the Podgo, where there's just not enough room anymore to put it there and I need something else more. So here is this little preset. I'll turn the compressor off, and here's what this tone sounds like. Love that Matchstick amp. So if I turn that compressor on, here's what we got. Just gives it a little bit of a glue compression, and if I look down at my Helix, I'm getting a couple dB of gain reduction. That's all I ever want, 1 to 2 dB of gain reduction. With it off. Funny thing is, it's probably, I could almost say, more of a feel thing for the player playing it. Just gives it a little bit of that glue and that squish. But let's say I wanted to add one to the front, I would likely come in and add something like a deluxe comp, right? With maybe a 4-to-1 or 6-to-1 if I was trying to get more of that country kind of squash and maybe a really fast attack time, not so much on the let me see here, on the release and bring that down. Put that off. And with the LA Studio Comp off. So with one of those on, actually the deluxe comp without the LA Studio Comp on at the end. Right, I find that those types of things will just help it to sit better in the mix, and it just gives a better feel under your fingers. Maybe even more, you know, real amp-like. And some people say sometimes, oh, the modelers don't have that real amp feel to it. And I find that LA Studio Comp at the end is one of those things that just does give it that little bit of glue that really adds something quite nice to it. So compression is number 5 on my list of sort of desert island effects pedals maybe, or effects pedals that I am going to want to have on my board if I'm only allowed 5 of them. On to number 4. Coming in at number 4 is a tremolo effect. I have been a huge fan of the tremolo effect, and I don't even know what this dates back to or what I ever maybe heard that made me go, wow, I love that effect. I just find it adds so much depth to the sound. In certain cases, obviously we can't use it all the time. That's not the type of effect I'm going to switch on and leave on. But if I'm playing something clean, if I'm playing, or even a distorted tone as more of a really harsh effect sometimes, if we go really dramatic on it, depending on the situation, it's a really wonderful effect. But for the clean tones, I just find, even if it's just a very subtle effect, again, you'll notice a lot of the things I'm going to tell you here, the effects that I am using, I'm not using them in a very overt way. I use them in a very subtle way, kind of just snuck underneath the tone in a way, just to kind of help it blend in the mix. And that's what I find a lot of these effects do, is you hear them in a mix and it just makes them sit beautifully, right? So here we have the tremolo effect, and on the Helix, the actual effect called the Tremolo, which I believe is just the Line 6 original. Usually what I do though is I always set it to be able to tap tempo it to whatever timing of the song is. I find that super important. That pulsing effect of the tremolo, I don't want that to be all out of time with the song and just kind of random. I kind of want it to be locked in. So I'll tap tempo it. And a lot of times I find I set the note syncs to an 8th note, and the intensity really depending on what I want, right? So at this note sync, I'm at 120 beats per minute, note sync of an 8th note, and then intensity at 10. Can really hear the pulsating of it, right? And the wave shape at sine, but I mean, I could even change that to square. Kind of get a really neat kind of a special effect. If I even change that up so it's faster. So you can get some fast, harsh effects like that. Or if we bring this back down to where I had it the 8th note, and then bring the intensity back more, and bring the wave shape to a sine. We can even make that more subtle by bringing it back to a quarter note. Right, and again, we can bring that intensity back more and just have it be a really subtle effect. That's really one of my favorite effects, but like I said, if you can do a lot with this, especially with the wave shape change, you know, changing it to a square and pumping that intensity up. Gives you almost more of that on and off effect. But I think that's more of a special effect. For just a sort of all-purpose general tremolo that would fit beautifully in the mix, I might go to a sine, maybe an intensity around 4.8, possibly an eighth note set around the tempo of the song. Can even work on the odd lead part, but I find for the cleans, it's just a beautiful effect to have put in there. So number 4 for me is tremolo. And number 3 is probably an effect that you might not expect from me, but that is a wah pedal. And a lot of times I don't put those in my presets, but some of them I do, depending on what I need. But it's an effect that I love in the studio and live for just giving me a little extra something. And I don't usually use it in the way that a lot of folks might think, where I would just kind of, you know, that sort of rocking it back and forth while you blow some lead stuff, Kirk Hammett style, right? I kind of like it for more subtle textural things a lot of times. And what I mean by that is if I have a little chord that I'm playing, I might just kind of do these types of things. You know, or maybe if I am playing lead, try to use it to shape more of a vocal quality each note. You know, that type of a thing where I'm using it to shape the vocal quality of the note rather than just pumping away on it. And that's how I really like to use a wah. Now, one of my favorites on the Helix is the chrome. And a lot of times what I find myself doing is I'll even, depending on what effect I want, sometimes I'll even bring it back a bit on the high control here, just to maybe like 1.8, 1.9. So that upper extreme maybe isn't so harsh. So a very different approach to the wah, I think, than a lot of times where we hear the kind of I won't do that. I don't want to get into copyright trouble. Okay, so that's my number 3 favorite effect, is the wah effect. Coming in at number 2 is probably not going to be any surprise to anybody, but that is a delay pedal. I am a huge, huge fan of delay pedals. I'm not like ridiculously picky about which delay pedal either. I can usually get something I need to work out of anything, but in the Helix, one of my favorites is the transistor tape. I just love, I am a big fan of the tape effects, just to get a little bit of grit onto the repeats, right? While leaving your kind of normal signal intact a little bit better. I always set, as you can see here on HX Edit, my transistor tape or my delay to note sync. This is another effect that I want in time with my song almost always. I'm sure there might be a scenario where I wouldn't do that, but I really almost can't think of it right now. I almost always want it in time with my song. And I find that way, the delay repeats just blend better, you know, and it doesn't sound sloppy. It works. And if I'm playing live where maybe the tempo is varying, I'm always on my tap tempo. If I'm hearing something at a time, I get over to my tap tempo. To me, a real deal breaker is anytime I've had real pedals, when a delay pedal doesn't have a tap tempo onto it, to me, I was like, I'm not interested, thanks. I always want it. No, that's my opinion. Other people's mileage may vary, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly acceptable, obviously. But I love it not locked in with the tempo of the song. Now, as far as feedback goes, I'm not a fan of like tons of repeats, and I find a lot of people will come in with delays and like have those delays trail on. I find sometimes when you're playing leads, they start to get walking all on top of one another. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll end up somewhere between 20 and 30% on that, right? So sometimes even lower than that, you know, maybe around low 20s. You know, and on the mix, again, maybe down in between 25, 30%, and I find that works really nicely. And this delay I really love. I always go back to the transistor tape because it gives me what I need, really. Now there I have the tremolo on. If I take it off, and that's my number 2 favorite effect, is having a delay on there. And my number 1 favorite effect that I like to have in my signal chain is a reverb, and that's probably not going to come as a surprise to many folks. One of the main reasons, especially with modeling, if we talk just about the modeling world for a second, you know, we are modeling the sound of an amp mic'd in the room, you know, so hearing sort of the recorded tone as we would have in a studio before. The difference is, though, micing a real cabinet, the microphone's always going to pick up some sort of room ambience of whatever room we're in, unless we're in some sort of crazy small isolated space, you know, that kills all of, you know, almost all of the reflections. We could cut that down on that. But in a normal room, put a microphone in front of an amp, pull it back a couple inches, you're going to pick up some room space. So a lot of times when we hear a recorded guitar, a real guitar mic'd, we do hear some sort of ambience. We think, no, we don't have any reverb on that, but there is a sort of natural ambience on it already. So recording direct with the modeler, unless we add some artificial reverb to that, we're not going to get those room tones. And I know a lot of folks will say, well, go to the early reflections on the cab. I don't find that, for myself anyways, in my opinion, is a replacement for the reverb that we would get. So at bare minimum, I like to have something like a room reverb with a decay of 5 and maybe a mix of 30 to 35%, which if I turn that off would sound like this, bone dry. So that setting usually will give me whatever I need, and then if I add in a little bit of delay with that, I find it really works nicely. Okay, so that's really nice. Now, there's going to be times where maybe we want a little more. And you might say, well, how do you decide how much reverb to put? Well, you know, a lot of times I'll use a rule of thumb that if I'm in a mix that's very busy and dense, lots of instruments going on, I may tend to pull the reverb back a bit so I kind of can cut through that mix a little bit better, unless the point is to have it sound further back in the mix, in which case I might go with more reverb, right? So that's going to be handled kind of by your mix control, right? If I come down to a mix control on here and go up to 50%, we kind of soften the tone up a little bit, right? If I pull that back to more like 25, 26, 27%, we're a much more forward tone. So I find the more of that reverb mix we have up, it's going to pull us back in the mix and help us sit in the mix. So it really depends on what you want. So if I was, you know, in a dense mix and I wanted to be able to cut through a little bit more, I might pull that mix back a little bit. If I want to sound like I'm sitting back in the mix a little bit more, I might throw that mix up a little bit higher. And then there's going to be times where if I'm in a really kind of sparse mix, where you know, maybe it's a slower song. And that's another thing, the tempo of the song is going to sort of tell us sometimes how much decay we want too. In a really fast song where we're playing a lot of notes, we probably don't want a big hall reverb where that every time we hit a note, that reverb goes on for 2 seconds. We might really want to pull that back so it's a much slower, faster kind of dissipation of the reverb so that it's gone by the time we get to our next notes. But again, it's just going to all be up to personal preference, right? But if I was in a song, a slower song, something where I want, or I'm just playing solo by myself where I have to fill up a lot more sonic space, I might pull up, you know, a hall verb and, you know, go up to like a 6 or a 7 decay maybe. Maybe bring the pre-delay up higher just so it doesn't jump on the note right away, and then even bring the mix up a little bit higher here, you know? Going to give the impression of those notes filling more space, which there is a lot of if you're playing by yourself. So that's why I love to use reverb a lot and adjust it depending on the scenario that I need. So that's it. That's my top 5 effects. I started with compression, went to tremolo, went to wah pedal, but maybe not in quite an obvious fashion, delay and reverb. And if you give me those 5 pedals on a pedal board, I'm probably going to be good for the vast majority of situations I need to pull off, right? And the beautiful thing about the Helix is we can have snapshots change to different settings. It's just such a wonderful thing. We can reorder them in different orders depending on what we want at any given time. And it's just such a fabulous tool that we have, and so easy to be able to come up with so many great things. And, you know, I've owned a lot of pedals over the years. I've owned stuff by Strymon, Eventide, some of the sort of top companies, Empress Effects, like I mentioned. You know, and I really don't miss a lot of them because the Helix gives us such an amazing array of really, really high quality, incredible effects that I really have nothing bad to say about any of them at all. Now, there are other times I would probably add other effects, maybe chorus, flange, phaser. There's so many of them, but I'm sort of saying these are my like top 5 desert island effects boxes. If I had to have them, this is what I would want to have on my pedal board. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that look at my top 5 effects pedals. For whatever it's worth, you know, I hope maybe you saw some settings or a different way to use them that might spark some inspiration for you to try new things. That's always an awesome thing. And it happens to me all the time. I see somebody use something, I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I never thought of doing it that way. I'm going to do that too. That's really awesome. So there's so many great little tips we can share with each other and in the way we use things to make, you know, just to open up so many more possibilities for all of us. So, and that's what it's really all about. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like it and share it if you don't mind. Spread the word about what I do here. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the little bell notification so you get notified when I put new content out. And I will be back soon with some more content. Hopefully something you guys will enjoy. Thanks again for tuning in and for your time. Ciao for now.